My name is Emily Hale. I'm 31 years old. 2 Sundays ago, my mother-in-law reached into her purse at the dinner table, pulled out a folded stack of papers, and set them down in front of my husband like she was laying out a winning hand of cards. "I think it's time you saw the truth," she said. She had secretly ordered a DNA test on our 4-year-old daughter without telling either of us. She thought those results would finally prove what she'd been hinting at for years. What she didn't count on was that the same test would blow her own life apart instead. Here's the part nobody else at that table knew. Not my husband. Not his brother. Not even his own father. I had found out about the test 11 days before that dinner happened. And what I did with those 11 days is the reason I'm telling you this story today. Before I take you back to where this all began, if you're the kind of person who likes stories about family secrets finally catching up to the people who kept them, go ahead and hit subscribe now. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every single one. Now let me take you back 6 years, to the first time I ever sat across a table from Vivian Chandler. I was 26. Ryan and I had been together 5 months, and he brought me to his parents' house on a Sunday afternoon in November. Vivian opened the door like she was checking references. She didn't hug me. She looked me up and down, shook my hand once, firm, and said, "So you're Emily." The first half hour was pleasant enough. Roast chicken, small talk, Ryan's father Gordon telling a story about a leak he'd fixed under the kitchen sink. Then Vivian did what I would learn, over the next 6 years, was her signature move. She steered the conversation somewhere quiet and personal, so smoothly you didn't notice you'd been moved until you were already there. "So, Emily, where's your family from?" I told her. "Small town outside Scranton, raised by my mother, who worked nights as a hospital records clerk." "And your father?" she asked. I set my fork down. "He wasn't really in the picture," I said. Vivian nodded slowly, touched the small silver cross she wore on a chain, and said, "That must have been so hard for you." She said it the way people say interesting when what they mean is noted. In the car afterward, Ryan said, "She really liked you." I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure that was true. What I noticed that night, and filed away without understanding it yet, was how much Vivian needed to know where things came from. Not just about me. About everything. She asked about the bottle of wine Ryan brought, who recommended it, where it was from. She was a woman who tracked origins the way other people track weather. I didn't know yet that this habit would someday be turned against my daughter. I just remember thinking, she keeps score. Ryan and I got married the following autumn. Small wedding, 35 guests, a barn venue an hour outside Pittsburgh. My mother flew in from Scranton. Vivian wore ivory, which my maid of honor called a bold choice for someone else's wedding. I let it go. I was marrying a genuinely good man, and I told myself the rest would sort itself out with time. The first year of marriage was quiet, the way new marriages often are. We rented a townhouse about 35 minutes from Vivian and Gordon. Close enough for holidays, far enough, I hoped, for breathing room. Vivian did not believe in breathing room. She showed up unannounced, usually on Wednesdays, sometimes Saturdays, letting herself in with the spare key we'd given her for emergencies, and rearranging whatever was within reach. My spice cabinet. My linen closet. Once she reorganized my bookshelf by color and left a sticky note, "Much easier on the eyes this way." Ryan's younger brother Caleb visited most weekends, always tagging along behind their mother, 23 years old and still living at home, still orbiting her like a moon with no gravity of its own. Every time Caleb visited, he'd leave, and by that evening Vivian would call Ryan with a list of small complaints about our house, our habits, our choices. I said nothing. I was new to this family. I was still learning which battles were worth fighting. At one Thanksgiving, Vivian raised her wine glass. "To Ryan," she said, looking around the table at Gordon, Caleb, her sister Denise, her brother-in-law Marcus. Then her eyes landed on me for exactly 1 second. He could have had anyone. The table laughed politely. I smiled and said nothing. But somewhere in my chest, something small and precise took note. Our daughter Nora was born on a Tuesday in April, 3 years into our marriage. 6 pounds, 11 ounces, screaming the second she hit the air, which the nurse said was exactly what you want. Her hair was dark at birth, nearly black. Vivian held her in the hospital room and said, "She has Ryan's chin." There was real warmth in her voice that day. For a moment I actually thought, maybe this is the thing that finally brings us together. That feeling lasted about 7 months. At 7 months, Nora's hair began changing. Not overnight, slowly, the way leaves turn in October. The near black softened to a warm chestnut, and by her first birthday it had brightened into a deep, unmistakable auburn, with a scatter of pale freckles appearing across her nose not long after. I thought it was beautiful. My grandmother on my mother's side had the same coloring, the same freckles across the same nose. To me, it was simply genetics doing what genetics does. To Vivian, it wasn't genetics. It was a discrepancy. "Interesting," she said at Nora's first birthday party, holding a strand of that auburn hair between 2 fingers the way you'd examine a torn receipt. "Where on earth does that come from?" I explained the recessive genes on my mother's side, how traits can skip a generation or two and then resurface. Vivian smiled the cross-necklace smile. Interesting. Because nobody on the Chandler side has ever had hair like that." She said it lightly, the way you'd mention a hairline crack in a foundation, not alarming, just something that should probably be looked at. Nobody responded. But I heard it, and I understood, with the certainty of someone who has spent a career reading rooms for a living, that she had already been sitting with this thought for a while. Over the following year, the comments became a steady drip. Never dramatic. Vivian was never dramatic in the early stages of anything. She was patient, methodical, laying down thin layers the way road crews salt a highway before a storm, nothing you feel underfoot until the ice is already there. She's just so unique looking. Nobody in our family has that coloring. Any Irish on your side? That might explain the freckles. I started keeping a log. A small spiral notebook in my nightstand drawer, a habit left over from my job. I'm a speech-language pathologist, and documentation is how I make sense of patterns, behavioral, developmental, emotional. By the time Nora turned 2, I had 17 entries. Caleb's girlfriend at the time picked up where Vivian left off without even realizing she was part of a campaign. She posted a photo of Nora at a family barbecue, auburn curls, green dress, standing in Vivian's garden, captioned, "She's so different looking from everyone. Wonder where she gets it," with a laughing emoji. 400 likes. I showed Ryan. He shrugged. "People say dumb stuff online. Don't read into it." The extended family started treating me differently, in ways nobody said out loud. Ryan's uncle Marcus avoided eye contact at gatherings. A cousin who used to text me recipes stopped responding altogether. And Vivian's sister Denise began watching me with the particular attentiveness of someone waiting to catch you in something. None of it was spoken. That was the point. Vivian wasn't building her case with words. She was building it with silence, the kind that fills a room with suspicion the way smoke fills a house long before anyone sees flame. I could feel it. I just couldn't prove it yet. The incident with the water bottle happened on a Thursday in the spring. Ryan had a work trip 2 states over. I had a full caseload at the clinic, including a 6-year-old with a severe stutter who needed extra time that day, and I couldn't reschedule him. Vivian offered to watch Nora. I dropped her off at 9 that morning with her lunch, her nap blanket, and her favorite insulated water bottle, the one with cartoon foxes on it that she refused to drink from anything else. When I picked Nora up that evening, the bottle was gone. "Oh, that old thing," Vivian said. I tossed it. It was starting to look grimy. It wasn't grimy. I'd bought it 2 months earlier. I let it go, loaded Nora into her car seat, and started for the door. But on my way out, walking through Vivian's kitchen to grab Nora's jacket off a chair, I noticed a small plastic zip bag sitting on the counter. Vivian moved fast, sweeping it into a drawer before I could get a good look. Just tidying up, she said. And on the hallway desk, half hidden under a stack of unopened mail, I saw a padded envelope, sealed, with a return address I couldn't quite make out from where I stood. I didn't connect any of it that night. The missing water bottle, the plastic bag, the envelope, they were puzzle pieces without a picture yet. I drove home, gave Nora her bath, read her the book about the little owl who couldn't sleep, and put her to bed. But the part of my brain trained to notice small inconsistencies, the part that spends all day watching for the tiny signs a child can't yet put into words, that part didn't switch off. It kept working quietly in the background, the way it always does. At work, I was a version of myself Vivian never saw. Around her, I was careful, measured, always adjusting to keep the peace. At the clinic, I got to be fully myself, because I chose to be calm there. There's a difference between the two. That spring, one of my clients was a 5-year-old named Theo, born with a severe expressive language delay. Getting him to form even a single clear word was a project measured in weeks, sometimes months. Some sessions he cried out of frustration. Some sessions he laughed so hard he forgot what we were working on. One Tuesday, after 9 weeks of drills, he looked me dead in the eye and said, clearly, "More, please." His mother cried in the hallway afterward. I cried a little in my car in the parking lot. My supervisor pulled me aside the next week and told me I was the steadiest person in a crisis she'd ever worked with. I didn't tell her that steadiness wasn't a personality trait. It was something I built on purpose, one difficult day at a time. I made $68,000 a year. Not wealthy, not struggling. Enough to cover my student loans, contribute to Nora's savings account, and occasionally take Ryan out to dinner without stressing about the bill. I mention this because later, when Vivian tried to paint me as someone who'd married into the family for stability, it mattered to me that I had built an entire life and career before Ryan was ever part of the picture. I earned my license. I chose this work because helping a child say a word they've never been able to say before is the closest thing I know to witnessing a miracle. Vivian never once, in 6 years, asked me a single question about my job. The first time Vivian said it in front of the whole family was at Easter. We were at her house, full table, Gordon, Caleb, Denise, Marcus, a cousin named Paige. Nora ran into the dining room in her yellow dress, auburn curls bouncing, and Paige said, "Oh my gosh, she's adorable." Vivian set down her wine glass. "She really doesn't look like any of us, does she?" She let the silence sit there and do its work. Nobody filled it. Gordon cleared his throat. Denise studied her plate. I looked at Ryan. He was looking at his food. He said nothing. The dinner continued as if nothing had happened. Nora ate her mashed potatoes. Vivian served dessert. The wound had been delivered and papered over in the same breath. In the car afterward, I said, "If your mother says that one more time in front of your entire family, I am going to respond, and you are not going to like how." Ryan's hands tightened on the wheel. "She won't. I'll talk to her." "When?" "Soon." That's what he'd said after Thanksgiving too. He didn't answer, and we drove the rest of the way home in silence, Nora asleep in the back seat, her curls pressed against the fabric of the car seat. He never talked to his mother. I knew, deep down, that he wouldn't. Ryan avoided conflict the way some people avoid a highway on-ramp, not out of fear, exactly, but because he'd learned early that the smoother path was also the one with fewer collisions. But I was done waiting for him to merge. 3 weeks after Easter, my phone rang while I was between clients, sitting in my office cleaning articulation cards. The number was local. I almost sent it to voicemail. "Mrs. Hale, this is Priya calling from Coreline Diagnostics. I'm reaching out to confirm we received a sample for genetic analysis under your daughter's name, Nora Chandler, age 4. I set the stack of cards down. I didn't submit a sample. The submission was made under the name Vivian Chandler. She's listed as the child's paternal grandmother. Our policy requires parental or legal guardian consent for testing on a minor, so we've placed the order on hold pending your authorization. Would you like to proceed, or should we cancel the request? Cancel it, I said. My hands were shaking by the time I hung up, but my voice hadn't cracked once. It never does when it actually matters, something I learned from my mother, who delivered difficult news to families for over 2 decades and never once raised her voice doing it. I sat in my office for a few minutes, staring at the anatomical chart of the vocal tract on my wall, letting the familiar terminology ground me. Then I picked up my phone and called a lawyer. Let me pause here, because what I did over the next 11 days is the entire reason I'm sitting here telling you this story instead of quietly falling apart. If this is hitting close to home for you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button now. It's worth staying for what's coming. I called an attorney that same afternoon. Her name was Marisol Ferrer, and she ran a small family law practice about 20 minutes from my office. She had a reputation, a friend had told me once, for being blunt and extremely thorough. I told her everything, the years of comments, the missing water bottle, the zip bag, the envelope, the phone call from the lab. She let me get all the way through without interrupting, which in my line of work I recognize immediately as the sign of someone who is genuinely listening. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Under Pennsylvania law, a grandparent has no authority to consent to genetic testing on a minor without the express permission of a parent or legal guardian. Full stop. What she did was not just inappropriate, it may be a violation of your daughter's privacy rights and potentially the basis for a civil claim. It could also expose the lab, depending on what's in their intake paperwork. She paused. Did she forge your signature on a consent form? I don't know, I said. We'll find out, she said, already making a note. In the meantime, she continued, do not confront her yet. Don't tell your husband. I stared at her. Why not? Because the second you tell him, he calls his mother. She cries, apologizes, asks him to keep it quiet to protect the family, and the exact same pattern repeats itself, except now you've lost your advantage. If you actually want this to stop, not just quiet down for a few months, but stop, you need to let her play out her plan. I paid the consultation fee, $300, and it remains the best money I've ever spent. Walking out of her office, I called Coreline Diagnostics back and asked them to confirm, in writing, that the sample had been destroyed, and to flag any future submission involving Nora Chandler without my explicit written consent. Then I drove to pick Nora up from daycare. She ran to the door with her arms up, auburn curls flying everywhere, and I picked her up and thought, nobody is taking anything from us. That night, after Nora was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and searched DNA testing minor consent laws Pennsylvania. The results confirmed everything Marisol had told me. A grandparent had no legal standing whatsoever to order genetic testing on a grandchild. I searched further, into how at-home consumer kits worked, and that's where things got more complicated. Clinical labs like Coreline had strict verification steps, which is exactly why they'd called me. But consumer ancestry platforms, the kind that advertise family trees and long-lost relatives, often just had a checkbox, I am the parent or legal guardian. Click. Submit. Done. Vivian had used a clinical lab for what I assumed was a straightforward paternity-style test. But had she also used one of the consumer platforms, the ones built for finding relatives, not just confirming parentage? I opened her rarely used Facebook page. In February, months earlier, she had commented very interesting under an article a cousin shared titled something about the surprising things ancestry tests can reveal about a family. I took a screenshot and saved it in a folder on my desktop labeled, simply, documentation. Then I opened my spiral notebook, the one with the log of comments about Nora's hair, and added an 18th entry, the date, and the confirmation call from the lab. I looked toward the bedroom, where Ryan was already asleep. I wanted so badly to wake him up and show him everything. But Marisol's words kept circling back. Let her play out her plan. So I turned off the lamp, and I waited. The hardest part of those 11 days wasn't the waiting. It was carrying it completely alone. For the first few days, I moved through my life like nothing had changed. I went to work. I treated my clients. I came home, cooked dinner, gave Nora her bath, read her the same book about the little L for what felt like the 100th night in a row. Ryan noticed nothing unusual, and I don't blame him for it. He was in the middle of a demanding stretch at his job managing 3 commercial sites, coming home exhausted, kissing Nora on the forehead, kissing me on the mouth, asleep most nights by 9:30. One night, Nora climbed into bed between us at 2 in the morning, the way she sometimes did, small bare feet padding down the hallway like a tiny diplomat arriving uninvited to a summit. She curled into Ryan's side, auburn curls fanned across his pillow. I lay awake watching them in the glow of the nightlight, his jaw, her curls, his slow steady breathing, her small fist gripping the collar of his shirt. I thought about my own mother, who raised 3 kids alone on a records clerk's salary after my father left, no safety net, no backup plan, and did it by documenting absolutely everything, insurance claims, school forms, budgets scratched onto the backs of old envelopes. She taught me, without ever saying it directly, that information by itself isn't power. Knowing exactly when to use it is. At the clinic that week, I worked with a 7-year-old girl practicing a difficult consonant blend she'd been avoiding for months. She got it wrong 9 times in a row. On the 10th try, she got it clean, and she looked up at me, stunned by her own mouth. Again, I said. Some things simply cannot be rushed. You prepare, you position yourself, and you wait for the exact moment the pieces click into place. I wasn't quite ready yet. But I was getting close. On the 9th day, I got lucky. I drove over to Vivian's house to retrieve a pair of Nora's shoes she'd left behind the previous weekend. Vivian was out, a hair appointment, according to Caleb's girlfriend, who let me in and then went right back to a video call she had propped against a stack of magazines in the living room. I walked past her toward the mudroom, and her voice carried the way it always did, louder than she probably realized. She has the results already. She's doing it at Sunday dinner. In front of literally everyone. A pause while the person on the other end said something I couldn't hear. I know, right? She's been planning this for weeks. She thinks once he sees the paperwork, he won't have a choice but to believe her. I stood frozen with one of Nora's sandals in my hand. She glanced over, saw me, and ended the call fast. Oh, hey, sorry, just chatting with a friend. I smiled. No worries, just grabbing Nora's shoes. Cool. Tell Ryan I said hi. Will do. I walked to my car, set the shoes on the passenger seat, and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went pale. Now I had 3 pieces of information I didn't have before: when, where, and who would be watching. Vivian had built herself a stage. She'd cast an audience without asking them. And she believed, completely, that the results would say exactly what she wanted them to say. I wasn't going to try to stop her. I was going to let her strike the match herself. On the 11th day, I found James, except it wasn't him, exactly. It was a man named Curtis. I hadn't been looking for a person at all. I'd been trying to understand how Vivian's ancestry platform submission worked, so I made my own account on the same service, submitted a sample of my own DNA, and spent an evening reading about how these familial matching systems actually function. Here's what I learned: once you submit a sample, the system doesn't just check for a single relationship. It cross-references your entire genetic profile against every other profile in its database, flagging anyone who shares enough markers to be a plausible relative: siblings, cousins, half-siblings, second cousins, all of it. Vivian had submitted Nora's DNA. That meant Nora's profile was now searchable against the same database. I logged into the account Vivian had made, using an email address I found through a password reset trick Caleb's girlfriend had mentioned once without realizing what she was handing me. The password, when I finally guessed it correctly, was Nora's birthday. Of course it was. And there, listed under potential relatives on Nora's profile, was a name I had never once heard in 6 years: Curtis M., age 39, living in Columbus, Ohio. Relationship estimate: half-uncle or equivalent. I stared at the screen for a long time. A half-uncle meant one of exactly 2 things. Either Ryan's father had a son nobody knew about, or Vivian did. I took a screenshot, saved it to the documentation folder, and forwarded it straight to Marisol. The next morning she called. "If this match is accurate," she said, "it means someone in the Chandler bloodline has a biological child they've never disclosed. Or Vivian does, since she's the one who submitted the sample." "Either way," I said, "we need to find out who Curtis is." It took 2 more evenings of digging, but I found him. Curtis Marshall, born in the fall of 1988 in Columbus, adopted as an infant through a private agency. The platform had limited public information, but Curtis had opted into an open-to-contact setting, with a short bio attached: adopted at birth, searching for biological family, open to hearing from anyone who matches. I never reached out to him. That wasn't my place. But I did the math. Born in 1988 made Vivian 23 at the time. She and Gordon had married in 1990, and Ryan was born the following year. Which meant Vivian had a child 2 full years before she ever married Gordon, a child she had apparently given up, and never told a single soul about, except, I began to suspect, one person who had been sitting at every family dinner for years, watching me with those pointed, careful eyes, her sister Denise. Because when I looked more closely at Curtis's match report, there was a shared matches section, other profiles connected to both Curtis and Nora. One was tagged simply Denise R. Possible aunt or half-aunt. Denise's middle name, I remembered from an old wedding program, was Renee. Denise knew. She had known for 38 years. I sat at my kitchen table that night and thought about Vivian, not with anger, not yet, but with something closer to understanding. A 23-year-old woman, unmarried, likely terrified, making a choice that would follow her for the rest of her life. I know something about impossible choices. I grew up watching my mother make them constantly. But understanding why someone once lied is not the same thing as forgiving what she did with that lie for the next 38 years. Vivian hadn't just given up a child. She had buried the truth so deeply that she'd convinced herself the only threat to her family's bloodline was sitting at her own dinner table, married to her son. She was terrified of being exposed. And she had aimed that terror, like a weapon, directly at my 4-year-old daughter. On the Thursday before the dinner, Vivian called. "Big family dinner this Sunday. I want everyone there. I already told Gordon to invite Denise and Marcus." Her voice was bright, too bright, the particular brightness of someone who has rehearsed a scene in front of a mirror. "We'll be there," I said. That Friday, I printed everything. The lab confirmation. The platform login records. The screenshot of the match report showing Curtis, and the one showing Denise's connection. I organized it all in the documentation folder by date, backed it up to a cloud drive, and emailed copies to Marisol. "If she goes through with this publicly," I wrote, "it only strengthens our position, because now there are witnesses." She wrote back almost immediately, "Are you certain you want to let this play out at the dinner? You could still end it privately before Sunday." I told her I was sure. On Saturday night, I gave Nora her bath. She splashed happily while I worked shampoo through her curls, damp and dark against her neck. "Mommy," she said out of nowhere, "why does Grandma Viv always touch my hair?" I paused, struck by how much a 4-year-old notices without being told to. "Because your hair is beautiful, sweetheart." "Is it magic hair?" I smiled. "The most magic there is." I dried her off, got her into pajamas, read her the Owl book twice because she asked, and she fell asleep holding on to my thumb. Ryan came upstairs a while later. "Mom seems really worked up about tomorrow. Wonder what's going on with her." I looked at him, my husband, kind face, tired eyes, a man who had spent his entire life believing his mother was exactly who she claimed to be. "I guess we'll find out," I said. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay staring at the ceiling, running through every possible version of the next day. In every single one, the truth came out eventually. The only real question was how much it would cost, and who would end up paying for it. Sunday morning I dressed simply. A soft blue sweater, dark jeans, the small gold necklace Ryan gave me on our first anniversary. No armor, no performance. Just myself. Nora wore her favorite yellow dress and spun in circles in front of the hallway mirror until I caught her mid-twirl. Ryan loaded the car. Classic rock played low on the radio the whole drive. Nora was asleep before we hit the interstate. I watched Ryan's hands on the wheel, steady, capable hands that built things for a living, things designed to hold weight. And I thought, today those hands would either hold mine, or let go of everything. We pulled into Vivian's driveway a little after 4. 3 cars already parked out front, Gordon's truck, Denise's SUV, Marcus's sedan. A full house. Vivian met us at the door, hugging Ryan longer than usual, the kind of hug a mother gives when she believes she is about to do something righteous. She gave me a brief nod. "Put Nora down for a nap in the guest room," she said. I carried Nora upstairs, laid her on the bed, and pulled a blanket over her legs, her curls spread across the white pillow. Back downstairs, the family was already gathered. Gordon in his usual armchair by the window. Marcus beside him. Denise on the couch, arms crossed tightly. Caleb's girlfriend setting out napkins near the sideboard. And on the hallway table, exactly where I'd glimpsed it 11 days earlier, sat the padded envelope. Thick. Sealed. Waiting. Vivian caught me looking at it and smiled. "Dinner first," she said. The roast was good. I'll give her that much. Cooking had always been one of the few things about Vivian that wasn't a performance. Gordon told a story about a fishing trip. Marcus laughed. Someone complimented the gravy. Ordinary sounds, an ordinary dinner on the surface, while underneath it I watched every current moving beneath the calm. Caleb's girlfriend checked her phone every 30 seconds, not texting, just checking the time. She was on a countdown. Denise held her fork the way you hold a railing on a bridge, gripping it tightly, eyes fixed straight ahead, eating almost nothing. Vivian sat at the head of the table, smiling, asking Marcus about his new car, refilling Gordon's water glass, performing calm the way an actress performs grief. Technically flawless. Completely hollow underneath. About 20 minutes in, once the small talk had run its course and Gordon was mid-sentence about a carburetor, Vivian stood up. She smoothed her blouse, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and cleared her throat. "Before dessert," she said, "there's something I need to share with the family." The table went silent. Gordon stopped talking. Marcus set down his fork. Caleb's girlfriend glanced toward Denise. Denise closed her eyes for just a second, long enough for me to notice. Vivian walked to the hallway and returned holding the envelope out in front of her chest, the way a prosecutor holds an exhibit for the jury to see. "Open it," she said, sliding it across the table toward Ryan. He looked at it, then at his mother. "What is this?" Vivian placed both hands flat on the table, her breathing measured, rehearsed, the same steady cadence I imagined she used delivering difficult news during her decades working in school administration. "It's a DNA test. For Nora." The room seemed to contract, the walls pulling inward, the air suddenly thinner. Gordon said, low, "Vivian, what did you do?" She didn't look at him. She looked at me. "No offense, dear. But this family deserves to know the truth." "Mom," Ryan said quietly. "What truth?" "I had her tested privately, because I love this family, and that little girl," she pointed toward the ceiling, toward the room where our daughter was sleeping, "does not look like a Chandler. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. That coloring does not come from our side. And I think Ryan has every right to know whether that child is actually his." The sentence hit the table like a brick through glass. Marcus stared at his hands. Caleb's girlfriend's mouth fell open, then shut again. Gordon gripped the arm of his chair. Ryan stared at the envelope, his hand steady, jaw working the way it does when he's deciding between silence and something he can't take back. "Open it," Vivian said again, smiling, genuinely believing, all the way down, that the contents would prove her right. Ryan broke the seal and pulled out several pages of lab letterhead. He read the first page in silence. 10 seconds. 15. Long enough for Vivian to shift her weight from one foot to the other. He looked up. She's mine. Vivian blinked. What? Probability of paternity, 99.9997%. He held the page up. She's my daughter. The smile on Vivian's face didn't fall so much as fracture, like ice cracking across a windshield, still there, but no longer holding anything up. That can't be right. Let me see that. She reached for the pages. Ryan pulled them back. No. You've done enough. Caleb's girlfriend murmured something about the lab possibly making a mistake. Ryan turned to her, sharper than I'd ever heard him. Not now. She went quiet. Vivian's hand rose to the small cross at her neck, twisting it the way I'd watched her do at that very first dinner 6 years earlier, at every Thanksgiving, at Easter, every moment her certainty ran into something solid. There has to be an explanation, she said, quieter now. The coloring, it doesn't add up. Ryan set the pages down and looked at me for the first time since his mother had stood up. I'd been sitting quietly at the far end of the table, hands folded in my lap, watching. Now it was my turn. The results are accurate, Vivian, I said. My voice was level, the same voice I use telling a parent their child is making real, measurable progress. Calm, clear, carrying more weight than volume. I know, because the lab called me 11 days ago to verify consent. Consent you never actually gave them, because you weren't legally allowed to. The room shifted, not a sound exactly, more like a vibration you feel through the floor before you hear the train coming. Gordon leaned forward. You tested our granddaughter without asking either of them? Vivian's chin lifted. I was protecting this family. Under Pennsylvania law, I said, a grandparent cannot authorize genetic testing on a minor without written parental consent. Your attorney can walk you through the specifics if you'd like. Mine already has. I said it the way I write a progress note, factual, chronological, no adjectives attached. Vivian's face moved through 3 colors in quick succession, pale, then flushed, then pale again. But the lab they should have followed protocol. They did, I said. You didn't. Silence held. Denise pressed her lips together and looked at the tablecloth. Marcus glanced at Gordon. Gordon looked at his wife with an expression I had never once seen on his face, not anger, not disappointment, something worse, the look of a man realizing he doesn't fully know the person across the table from him. I let the quiet sit for a few seconds. Then I said, but that's not actually the most interesting thing in there. Every head turned. Ryan looked at me. What do you mean? Keep reading. Page 4. He flipped past the paternity confirmation, past the methodology section, and reached the familial match report. He read it out loud, slowly, the way you read something before you fully understand what it's telling you. Potential familial match. Curtis M. age 39. Columbus, Ohio. Relationship estimate, half-uncle to Nora Chandler. He stopped. Read it again. Looked at the page, then at me, then at his mother. Half-uncle. That would mean he's either my half-brother, or, he's not mine, I said quietly. Ryan turned to his mother. Mom. Who is Curtis? Vivian's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. Her fingers, the ones that had been at her cross necklace all night, hung motionless. Even her nervous habit had abandoned her. I don't know what that, Vivian, don't. 2 words, and every person at that table suddenly understood something they hadn't a second earlier. Gordon stood slowly, his chair scraping across the floor. Answer him. Vivian's eyes filled and she looked, helplessly, at Denise, who gave the smallest possible shake of her head. It was before you, Vivian said, her voice cracking, not a rehearsed crack, a real one, the sound of a wall that has held weight for decades finally giving out. I was 23. I wasn't ready. You had a child, Ryan said flatly. I was so young. I was terrified. You had a child, he repeated, standing now too, and you never told me. You never told Dad. Gordon's hand found the back of his chair and gripped it like the floor had suddenly tilted. 38 years, Vivian. We've been married 36 of them. Gordon, please, it was before us, I was so ashamed, you told Denise. He looked at his sister-in-law, who was still frozen on the couch, one hand pressed against the arm of it. But not me. She was scared. Gordon, were you scared for 38 straight years, Denise? Because that's not a moment of panic anymore. That's a decision, made fresh every single day, for almost 4 decades. Nobody moved. Vivian cried, real tears this time, not the practiced kind she deployed when Ryan forgot to call on Sundays or when plans got cancelled. For one strange moment, watching her, I didn't see the woman who had spent 6 years quietly building a case against my daughter. I saw a frightened 23-year-old signing paperwork in an office somewhere, walking away from a baby she wasn't allowed to keep. My chest actually ached for that girl. Then Vivian wiped her eyes, straightened her back, and said, this is Emily's fault. She dug this up to humiliate me. Whatever sympathy I'd felt a second earlier evaporated instantly. Ryan stepped forward. Mom. Emily didn't dig up anything. You ordered the test. You planned this dinner. You slid that envelope across the table yourself. He picked the pages back up and held them toward her. I think it's time you saw the truth. Isn't that what you said 20 minutes ago? Well. We saw it. Vivian sat back down, missing the chair slightly, catching herself on its edge. Denise reached toward her. Vivian pushed the hand away. I didn't know about Curtis, Denise said, voice shaking. Mom told me Nora wasn't Ryan's. She said she had proof. She doesn't, Ryan said. Caleb's girlfriend was crying now too, mascara running, looking less like the confident 20-something who'd posted that photo years earlier and more like someone realizing the ground she'd been standing on was never solid at all. I'm so sorry, Emily, she said. I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. There was nothing else left to say at that table. Gordon reached for his jacket off the back of his chair, put it on slowly, deliberately, the way he did everything. I need to go for a drive, he said, not looking at Vivian. To Ryan, get your family. We're leaving too. I went upstairs and found Nora still asleep, curls fanned across the pillow like small copper rivers. She stirred as I lifted her, pressed her face into my neck, and settled again. Downstairs, the room was emptying. Marcus already had his coat on. Denise stood frozen by the china cabinet, arms wrapped around herself. At the front door, Vivian stepped in front of Ryan, eyes swollen, her whole posture suddenly 10 years older than the woman who'd stood up so confidently 20 minutes earlier. Ryan, please, don't leave like this. We can talk about this. You didn't want to talk, Mom, he said. You wanted an audience. Denise tried, weakly. Can everyone just calm down? Gordon, already at his truck, called back without turning around. Denise, say one more word and I'm calling a lawyer in the morning. The sentence landed on the porch like a gavel. Denise went quiet. We drove home mostly in silence, Nora asleep in the back, the highway nearly empty on a Sunday evening. About 10 minutes in, Ryan finally spoke. How long did you know about the test? 11 days. And about Curtis? 9. Why didn't you tell me? I had thought through this answer long before I ever had the words for it. Because you needed to see it happen, not hear about it secondhand. If I'd told you privately, you'd have called her. She'd have cried, apologized, asked you to protect the family, and nothing would have actually changed. That pattern is 38 years old. I couldn't undo it with a conversation. He was quiet for a mile. You're saying I would have let her off the hook again. I'm saying you didn't know there was a hook to begin with. Now you do. He drove another mile before speaking again. I have a half-brother. In Columbus. He said the word slowly, like he was testing its weight in his mouth. I watched his profile in the passing streetlights, the same John Nora had inherited, shoulders that carried more than just his job's demands. He was processing, not shutting down, not deflecting. Processing. Somewhere around our exit, he reached across the console and took my hand, and didn't let go again until we pulled into our own driveway. He turned off the engine and sat there a moment before looking at me. "Thank you," he said, "for not protecting me from this." I squeezed his hand. "That's not what partners do." Monday, Ryan called his mother. Told her he needed space, and that she was not to contact me or Nora in the meantime. Tuesday, Gordon called to say he was staying at Marcus's for a while. "Told your mom I need time to think," he said, voice steady, no tremor in it at all. Wednesday, Caleb's girlfriend texted me 3 words, "I'm so sorry," followed by a longer message admitting she should have questioned Vivian instead of simply believing her. I told her I appreciated her saying so. Thursday, Marisol sent a formal cease and desist letter to Vivian, along with notice of a potential civil claim under Pennsylvania's privacy statutes regarding unauthorized genetic testing of a minor. Vivian called Ryan in a panic. He told her to read the letter carefully and speak to an attorney of her own. Friday evening, Ryan sat at our kitchen table with his laptop open, quiet but focused in a way I recognized, like he was constructing something carefully in his head before letting anyone see it. "I found him," he finally said. "Curtis. He's an accountant. Married, 2 kids." He turned the screen toward me, a small photo from a community league softball roster, dark hair, the same slight crook in the nose Ryan has. He posted on that platform 4 years ago, looking for his birth mother. Behind us, on the counter, the manila envelope sat exactly where I'd set it down the night before, unsealed. The document meant to destroy our family had quietly become the document that helped rebuild an entirely different part of it. Ryan wrote Curtis a message the next morning, rewriting it 3 times before landing on something short and honest: his name, his belief that they were half-brothers, and an offer to talk if Curtis was open to it. Curtis responded within the hour. "I've been looking for her for years. I never once thought I'd hear from a brother instead." They scheduled a video call for that same evening. Ryan set his laptop up at the kitchen table while I took Nora into the living room to watch her favorite show about a family of otters. Around 7:15, I heard Ryan say, "Hey, I'm Ryan," and then a voice I didn't recognize, deeper, steadier. "Hey, Ryan. I'm Curtis." I stayed in the other room, but I could still hear pieces of it drifting through the doorway. 20 minutes in, I heard Ryan start to cry, not the quiet, contained kind, but the kind that comes from somewhere deep in the chest, a place most men spend years pretending doesn't exist in them at all. I stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment. On the screen, Curtis was crying too. Same jaw. Same eyes. 39 years apart, and they looked like 2 versions of the exact same blueprint. "Does she know?" Curtis was asking. "My birth mother, I mean." Ryan wiped his face. "She knows. It didn't go especially well. I don't want to cause any problems for anyone. I just wanted to know where I came from. You're not the one causing problems, Curtis. You're not the one who lied for 40 years. Nora tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, why is Daddy sad?" I picked her up. "He's not sad, baby. He's meeting someone brand new." 2 weeks later, Vivian showed up at our door unannounced, the old pattern kicking in out of habit, except the side door was locked now, and the code had been changed. She knocked at the front instead. I opened it. She stood there in a gray cardigan, eyes rimmed red, looking a full decade older than the woman who had slid an envelope across her own dinner table with such confidence. "I need to explain," she said. "I was so young. My parents made me give him up. I've carried that for almost 40 years. Ryan appeared behind me. "Then you should have dealt with it honestly a long time ago. Instead you put all of it onto my wife and my daughter. I was trying to protect this family." "You weren't protecting anyone, Mom. You were protecting your secret." Vivian looked at me directly. "Emily, please. I'm asking for a chance." I considered her for a long moment, this woman who had spent 6 years cataloging every flaw she thought she saw in me, who had stolen a sample of my daughter's DNA, who had planned a public reckoning at her own table and genuinely called it love. "Vivian," I said, "you're welcome to have a relationship with Nora. She loves you, and we're not going to take that away from her." Hope flickered across her face. "But it will happen on our terms, on our schedule, and you will never again be alone with her." The hope dimmed but didn't fully disappear. She nodded and, for the first time in 6 years, didn't argue with me at all. Gordon called Ryan on a Tuesday, about 3 weeks after that dinner. He'd been at Marcus's the entire time. "First time in my life I've slept under another man's roof," he said. He mentioned he'd started seeing a counselor. "He says I need to figure out what I can live with and what I can't." A long pause, the sound of wind on the line, he was probably standing outside. "I can live with a mistake she made at 23. People make mistakes. I've made plenty myself. But I cannot live with 38 years of silence. That's not a mistake anymore, son. That's a choice she made new every single day." Ryan didn't respond right away. Sometimes silence really is the kindest thing a son can offer his father. The following Saturday, Gordon drove over with a small wooden truck he'd carved and painted himself in Marcus's garage. "For my granddaughter," he said at the door. Nora saw him from the hallway and ran straight into his arms. He held her for a long time, her curls pressed against his flannel collar. Then he looked at Ryan. "She looks exactly like your mother did at that age, you know. Before she started dyeing it." Ryan nodded. "I know now." 6 months later, Ryan flew to Columbus and met Curtis in person. They sat in a diner for nearly 4 hours. Two men with the same jaw, the same crooked nose, 39 years of distance folded into a single afternoon. In August, Curtis and his family drove out to visit us, and his kids played in our backyard with Nora while Ryan and Curtis sat on the porch with iced tea, watching their daughters run through the sprinkler together like they'd known each other their whole lives. Vivian and Gordon started couples counseling. Gordon moved back home after 2 months, but with conditions: full honesty going forward, no more locked drawers, no more buried decades. Vivian agreed. She stopped dyeing her hair. It grew in a soft, natural auburn at the roots, threaded through with gray, the ghost of the girl she'd spent 40 years trying to erase. Denise wasn't invited to that year's Thanksgiving. Nobody discussed it out loud. The empty chair spoke for itself. At work, I helped a little boy with a severe stutter get through an entire sentence, start to finish, without a single block. His mother cried in the hallway. I wrote in his chart, fluent production of full sentence achieved. Continued progress expected. Some things simply take time. But they do come. The manila envelope still sits in a drawer in my desk. I've never thrown it away, not because I need it for anything anymore, but because it reminds me that sometimes the very weapon someone builds to destroy you ends up being the thing that finally sets you free. Here's what I know now, after all of it. The people who work hardest to expose someone else's secrets are usually the ones carrying the heaviest secrets of their own. And the truth doesn't actually need a stage, or an audience, or an envelope slid dramatically across a dinner table. It just needs enough time. That's my story. A DNA test, a family dinner, and a secret that had been buried for 38 years. If this reminded you to trust yourself even when everyone around you seems certain you're wrong, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you so much for watching. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.